It might be corny, but it's true. The best things in life for me are free, like these thousands of fabulous seabirds spiralling around this island. And the next best thing is getting a really good photograph of them, and that is never easy. To take a good wildlife photograph, you have to take a new look at that wildlife, perhaps at an animal you've seen for the last 10 years every day in your back garden. You have to be innovative, and sometimes you have to manipulate it to make a masterpiece. Now, it doesn't matter whether you've got a compact camera or the latest 35mm SLR autofocus gadget. No camera ever took a great photo. Photographers do that. In this series, we're not just going to concentrate on lenses, f-stops and shutter speeds, but something equally important: how, where and when to get close to animals. It's called fieldcraft, and sometimes how to control them to make sure you get your shot. The type of picture you might want to see hanging on your living room wall. The type of picture, if you're really into it, that might win a major competition. One of the biggest in the world is the Wildlife Photographer of the Year competition. These pictures have all been winners or highly commended. Professional and amateur photographers from all over the world compete side by side. Amateurs do very well, and you do not necessarily have to have been snapping on the Serengeti plains to stand a chance of winning. This is an absolutely stunning picture of a lioness. It was taken on the plains of Africa by an English photographer. It's got a lovely low angle with the dark blue sky behind it. A very threatening, awe-inspiring photo. Lovely saliva dribbling off the bottom jaw and covered in flies. But it is a very simple portrait. This one, on the other hand, is what I call a better photograph. It's altogether more artistic. It's a close-up of a parrotfish's eye. Now, had it been a bit wider, it would have been an ordinary picture of a parrotfish. But now, it's a mass of iridescent colours in a beautiful pattern. This one, on the other hand, is again a close-up, this time of a tiny piece of birch bark. So realistically, you could have taken this photograph just about anywhere in the world, because birch grows anywhere in the world. You could have taken this in your back garden. And that is what this series is about. How to explore your garden or the local countryside. How to find pictures of animals and plants which really capture the beauty of British wildlife in a new and exciting way. My own career as a photographer started by submitting photos to this competition. I concentrated on finding an original way of seeing what I thought I'd seen too often: common animals. See the world and capture a little of Africa through your lens. Of course, we know the camera never lies. What you see is what you get. But everything is not always what it seems. It's a con. We're not in the shadow of Kilimanjaro at all. We're at windy Whipsnade. And what on earth are we doing here? Well, you see, if you want to get into wildlife photography, you face two major problems to start with. Firstly, the equipment. It's quite complex stuff, and until you're completely au fait with it, what's the point of wasting lots of time getting close to animals when you're not going to get the picture? Why not come to a wildlife park where the animals roam about free all day and you can take as long as you like trying out that shot? And what's more, if you feel a bit peckish, you can always have a hot dog and an ice cream, and you don't get those in the heart of Africa. So, once you've gobbled a mivvy and wiped the mustard off your chops, you can snap away to your heart's content. The trick is to take a picture in the wildlife park and not have it look like a wildlife park. Let's be honest, it would be impossible to make all of this fencing look as if it was in Africa. So what we've got to do here is isolate the subject, and the subject is obviously a hippopotamus, one of my favourites. It's got a very sculptured head. They also spend a lot of time in water because they have very sensitive skin, And that means that when it's cutting across their nose and their eyes, it makes their head into more of an abstract. So what I'm going to do is use this very long colour photo of 400mm to get a picture of just the hippopotamus's head. One of the problems, I must say, is that it's looking pretty monochrome at the moment. There's not that much colour there. As soon as the sun is on the top of the hippo's head, it looks very white, and the rest of it's going to look pretty dark. It's quite tricky on the exposure. But they're still not in the right place. I may be waiting some time for them to move into that more colourful patch. Hippo skin is really something. They obviously haven't been using any cosmetics other than natural mud, but it's got a really neat texture. It's not smooth at all. It's very wrinkly with pimples on. And when that's backlit with the light coming from behind, it picks up all of that shape, and it does give the head a fabulous texture. And another thing I've just noticed is that these hippos have got, I can't put it politely, lots of nasal hair and hair growing out of their ears. And it looks really neat when it's backlit because it lines up with lots of little sparkly bits. Technical phrase, sparkly bits. In the end, I opted for this mugshot, an abstract slice of hippo in a pea green soup, with sparkly bits. Flamingos in afternoon sun are strikingly colourful. Their rich plumage contrasts with the deep green of the water, but what you exclude from the picture is as important as what you leave in. For instance, I like this abstract which only defines the subject when you focus on the eye of the bird. The same applies to this eider duck. The animal is less important than the patterns of its feathers, a chaos of vermiculated browns. Or in this case, the spiky wet fur of a sleeping otter. But we need not confine ourselves to detail. I photographed this captive eagle as it flew between two perches, spreading its wings as it landed. I used a flash to freeze the action. Now, purists will say that I cheat. They're right, I do. Pictorially, the only thing that is important is the quality of the final frame. If you can't afford 3 weeks traipsing around Tanzania after white rhinos like these, then places like Whipsnade offer a real alternative. That is not to say that captive animals are easy. It can still take a lot of time and patience, because it's nice to get something more than this perfectly presentable portrait. At Whipsnade, I wanted something with a little more punch, and I had to wait for it. Finally, I noticed the potential for the photograph I was really looking for. The rhinos gathered on the brow of a hill in front of a really bright white sky. Using very high contrast film, I overexposed the sky and left the rhinos as dark silhouettes. So on the transparency, they are black and the sky is purely transparent. I've effectively made a mask. I knew at home I had another transparency of a very dramatic sunset. So I sandwiched the two together inside a glass mount, and lo and behold, an anarchic Serengeti sky with a couple of rhino silhouettes. But exactly how does this work? Well, anything overexposed or white on transparency film is transparent, and as long as your blacks are strong enough to mask anything else, then they can do just that. In this instance, the black of the rhino silhouette is quite adequate to block out any of the unwanted sunset, whilst the transparent sky allows the sunset on the other side to shine through. But photographing exotic animals in wildlife parks is one thing. Throughout the rest of the series, we're going to concentrate on British wildlife, and what better place to start than your own back garden. The average back garden must have about 200 or 300 different species of insects. Over the course of the year, perhaps as many as 50 different sorts of birds and a handful of small mammals. So it really is a great resource to begin nature photography. Whether your garden is a suburban semi or a rose-covered cottage, you will need to explore it seasonally to find all of its opportunities. Spring and early summer are the best times for almost everything, but especially for flowers and insects, like this hungry hoverfly. If you want to attract butterflies, then plants like buddleia are a must. They and other plants are great nectar sources, just like this passion flower full of greedy bees. Grey squirrels are frequent visitors to gardens from any adjacent parks or woods. This one is collecting nest material to line its dray. Leaving food out will attract squirrels close to the house, and they are readily tamed. A vital factor in garden ecology is a pond, which also provides the photographer with a ready supply of interesting species. Again, spring is best for frogs and toads, which leave the water after breeding to spend the summer under damp stones and in crevices. Here they are much harder to find, as they only emerge at night to feed. On the edge of town, you may be able to tempt some larger mammals into your garden by regularly leaving food out. If you're really lucky, you could even befriend the local clan of badgers. To take good wildlife photographs, a compact or snappy camera is obviously not enough. You will need a 35mm SLR camera. In a world full of tempting, flashy equipment, the biggest headache for the newcomer is deciding what you really need. Cameras and lenses are no more than tools, no more than spanners and monkey wrenches, and there is a great habit among amateur photographers to collect photographic jewellery, and most of it is unnecessary. You need a very basic kit. Here's mine. First of all, I've got a very sturdy gadget bag. For natural history photography, you need something tear-proof and something that can bounce down a mountainside. I find this one particularly useful with this waist strap. It gives me both hands free. In terms of actual hardware, start off with a good pair of binoculars. These lightweight ones are particularly useful as they allow me to carry more camera equipment. Jumping straight into the bag, I'll show you that I use a pretty much Stone Age camera. It's an old manual affair, and one of the most useful lenses I find to put on it is this 70-210 zoom lens with a macro facility. I always use a lens hood. Any light down the lens makes it milky and perhaps even flary, highly unnecessary. Having said that, there are about 2 other lenses in this bag that I use with regularity. This one, the 28mm wide angle, subject foreground, big vista behind, really nice. And this one, my favourite lens, the 100mm macro, a gem. Macros are okay if you're interested in insects, but for anything bigger, you're going to need a telephoto. This is a 400mm internal focusing. As you can see, it's quite long and it's quite heavy. So the other key piece of equipment for me is this, the indefatigable tripod. I found this particular model really useful. You can perch it just about anywhere, and I can tell you, it's bounced down more than a few mountainsides and it still works today. The rest of the gear in the bag is pretty much jewellery that I was talking about. I've got this. This is an infrared remote release. I think I've used it once or twice. I've got a good old-fashioned Western light meter to check things out in difficult situations, a tabletop tripod, and a whole host of filters that I think I've used once or twice. There's only one that you really need, and that's this one, the polarizer. And one last thing. You'll need 1, 2, 3, perhaps even 4 of these. Cable releases. They always go astray, but if you want a steady picture, this is a must. Having said all of that, I'm swapping from this coal-powered equipment to this high-tech gear. And if you haven't bought too much already to make it too expensive to change over, I'd start here. This is all autofocus, auto-exposure, and it's ideal for wildlife photography. It takes out the drudgery and allows you to concentrate on the creative aspects. Autofocus cameras really do work. Some, like this one, snap a subject into focus simply by looking at it. This technology makes your response to sometimes fleeting opportunities much more certain, but it's no substitute for imagination. Making a snap into a photograph is totally dependent on your skills as an artist. To flex those skills, you need to have as much control as possible. You have more control if you can get the subject to come to you. Eric Ashby is a man who has mastered everything from mahogany plate cameras to autofocus over the years. And although surrounded by woodland, Eric has done much of his best work in his own garden.
When we came here in 1953, and that's a long time ago, there was virtually no wildlife in our garden. You hardly ever saw a deer, you hardly ever saw a badger, and you hardly ever saw a fox. Now, of course, because we put food out for them, we have quite a number.
Eric, you're very fortunate to have a garden which backs onto the New Forest, but a lot of people who live in towns probably underestimate just about how much they could attract into their gardens.
Yes, they can attract in towns quite a lot of animals, and birds, of course, for birds of various sorts. And I'm sure that anybody could do what I've done in that particular environment.
Now, the badger set that we're sitting in front of is a bit unconventional, isn't it, really? It's a set that you built for a special job.
It was. The BBC wanted me to go underground with in a set, badger set, which of course you can't do, because if you start to interfere with the set, the badgers would go. And if ever they did come back, they'd probably come back to a different part of the set that you were trying to film from. So I built the artificial set first. And then when it was almost done, I put some food up the pipe from outside and down the pipes from inside, and left some food in the feeding compartment. And then in about a week we had one badger.
Didn't take long.
It didn't take long, but of course there was no lights then.
Yeah.
When eventually I had a light, I tried 15 watt, and that was too bright. It just backed away. And so I had 5 watt, and very soon I could increase 15, 25, 40, 60, 100, and for filming I had 1,000 watt.
Blimey.
But that was turned up gradually. The lights are not in the sleeping chamber, they're slightly outside, shining through glass. The reason for that is, of course, they could lift their heads and bite hold of the bulbs. Didn't want that. Sometimes they do sleep under the lights, and I've had 6 of them sleeping. I've got a photograph, I think, of somewhere like number sleeping. And one morning I came down, they hadn't gone home. There were still several of them sleeping there.
Yeah.
So that was fine.
Excellent.
In the early days, in 1937, 38, I actually took the first picture of a badger. In those days, you know, I had a mahogany camera with using plates, you know, glass plates, and each plate had to be developed separately. The flashlight looked like an ordinary electric bulb with a bit of silver paper in it, and that was set off by a torch. So there I was, sitting down with a torch in my hand, waiting for the badger to come out, and I could hardly see the badger. Switch on the torch, the flash went, and that's the picture you see.
Oh, fabulous, fabulous.
But nowadays, I mean, how simple it is.
Yeah. Eric's pictures reflect both his patience and his understanding of the ecology of his subjects, but he couldn't get close to them if he didn't know where and when to look. One of Eric's favourite animals is the fox, and he has photographed and filmed hundreds. These days he provides a refuge for some, which now share his home.
Most of them have been rescued by other people and brought to us. Usually they find them on the edge of a road or something, and they're about two days old or 3 or 4 weeks old or something like that. And they've been dropped by the vixen. And I think what it is, the vixen is moving the cubs and drops one because a car comes along and doesn't go back for it. Therefore, it's got to be rescued.
So you rear them and then release those that can be released?
That's right. But it must be mentioned, though, that normally, if you see an odd cub, leave it alone, because the vixen will come along and find it. But obviously, on the edge of a road, you can't do that. You've got to pick it up. Their reputation, of course, is that they're vicious and smelly and verminous and anything you like, none of which is true. Mind you, they do have a few fleas, but just like a dog. But they're wonderful animals. They are really wonderful animals.
Of course, foxes are no longer just country animals. The urbanisation of the fox is a spectacular success story. Surely almost every garden has been visited by one. A few years ago, foxes were raiding my parents' dustbins on a pretty regular basis, and this gave me an idea for a photograph. Not the typical one you might have seen countless thousands of times in magazines, I certainly have, of them coming over the top, but something a little different. To find that new angle, I put the dustbin on its side, which is where they always end up anyway, and filled it full of specially selected rubbish, clean rubbish, which I stapled together so that when the fox started to rummage amongst it, it didn't knock it in front of my camera. More important, though, was baiting. And I had to bait the dustbin regularly for a period of over a week to get the fox used to coming to my set, and also to get it used to the security lamp, which I used to light it, something that it wouldn't normally encounter raiding dustbins. But I have to say, that was not the trick. The trick was really simple. I kicked the bottom out of the dustbin to get a dustbin's eye view of the fox raiding it. I set the camera up on a tripod, covered it with a black drape and fired it using the electronic release in through the kitchen window. All I had to do was wait for the fox to turn up. Urban foxes are remarkably tolerant of interference, and although a little more cautious, will normally return to the scene of their crime. It's still best to be fairly quiet, though, and keep the lights off indoors. Remotely fired shots need standard or even wide-angle lenses to work well, and they do so not only with foxes, but also with hedgehogs and badgers. One problem can be the click of the camera, which will scare off your subject, but you'd be surprised how few exposures you need to make before they ignore it. Once they've found that you are a good food source, most animals will keep coming back, so you can keep trying to get your shot. I eventually got my picture and entered it in the 1987 Wildlife Photographer of the Year competition. It won the Urban Wildlife category. So there you are, using resources which are freely available to you, your own backyard or perhaps the local wildlife park, you can transform an ordinary snap using a bit of imagination into a picture that could win a major photographic competition.
And you can see next week's Wild Shots at the same time, 8:30.
Hello and welcome to our Out and About. It's winter. I'd expect snow around because I've actually come to a commercial heather nursery on the edge of Dartmoor, Beddie Down Nurseries. No snow, aren't we lucky? But I've got a joint proprietor of this nursery, Tim Igarls. Now, Tim, you obviously feel like me that heather's an important plant, don't you?
Yes, that's right, Terry. I think they are, and I think that we've got a good example here of the stock bed and of our planting and the mother bed here.
You call them mother bed?
Yes, that's right. I mean, they basically are where everything starts from, and this is what we actually use, and the material on this bed, coming from this bed, we use to build up our stock and build up for new plants.
So how many plants are you growing a year?
About, well, we propagate about 500,000 plants, and then we're actually growing on for saleable stock at about 250,000, about 250,000.
That's not bad. I mean, that doesn't mean to say that you throw away 250,000 or 250,000 don't root, but you actually sell commercially again rooted cuttings.
That's right, yes, we do. We sell on to other people, particularly out of the area. We sell a large amount of rooted cuttings.
So you mean you get 500,000 from these beds here?
That's right. Off all these plants, we'll take roughly 500,000. Yeah. And about 400 varieties in total with that.
That's not bad. Now, I mean, one of the reasons of coming not only because of your expertise in rooting plant, but was to be able to see such a lovely range. Because we can get an idea. I mean, what's the one just going over here?
Well, this is Jennifer Ann. He's just going over now, as you can see. She's an early flowerer, and she's fairly new. She's quite recent, and you get that russet tone, of course, this time of year.
That's an attraction, isn't it, on some of them, not only the flowers?
It is, particularly late in the spring. You do start to get that tone, and it starts to show up very well.
But some of them, I mean, I noticed back there you've got the dead flowers off Kaluna.
That's right, yes, they do big, long flower spikes. They look lovely at this time of year, particularly popular, of course, with the flower arranging.
And I did notice a lovely ginger colour on some dead flowers up there. It looks like a St Dabiox heath.
Yes, that's right. They also show up well. The flower stands up nicely above the foliage, and that's a very important factor really when dealing with that.
I think you've got a soft spot for Dabiox.
Oh, I do, yes. It's very nice, I think.
Been doing your own breeding?
Long flowering, that's their beauty. Yes, we've got one or two of our own types up there. We've got 5 or 6 different seedlings that we've picked out.
Now, can you tell me about these beds, because the way in which these have been constructed?
Yes, these were actually originally done with a potato ridger, and they're done on the basis of planting the heather on top of the ridge to try and get close to where it would be in its natural environment on the moorlands and this sort of thing. Basically, what we're trying to structure here is that all the cuttings, trimmings, and everything else that comes off falls into the gully and gets washed away, and therefore the plant stays absolutely clean. The black material that we have down is a woven polythene. It's not a pure polythene sheet, it's a woven polythene. This allows the water in to enter it, allows the air to enter it, so that you keep the soil nice and
controls the weeds.
And controls the weeds perfectly, yes. And it also I think actually warms up the soil as well, because being black, it takes up the sun's rays, and you does tend to keep the plants going nicely. And I think the actual structure of it is
But it's lovely,
ideal.
neat and clean.
That's right.
When we say neat and clean, look at the flowers on that carnea.
Yes, this one here is Claire Wilkinson. It's a new variety. It's only been on the market in the last 10 years. It's come out onto the scene, and it is a nice variety. It's certainly a paler colour than many of the carneas, and it's a very nice.
Because these
soft
will
texture.
actually, the carneas are the lime tolerant, aren't they?
Yes, that's right.
You know, Albert Jones in Somerset has got a garden of just all winter heath because he's on a limey soil.
Yeah, yes, and that's really you've got to be looking at the carneas and the dahliensis. We'll come to them in a minute.
But some people go, of course, for coloured foliage.
Yes,
And sparks.
And sparks, lovely, lovely.
It's a gorgeous colour, isn't it?
Lovely orange at this time of year, going a yellower colour in the wind in the summer.
And now the deeper colours on the carneas. Were we looking at there? Myrotum?
Yes, Martown Ruby. Considered by many to be the best, but of its type.
Well, I mean, you can't ask for much better than that in colour, can you?
Lovely colour.
Yeah. Didn't expect to start getting rain like this, but there we are. Better than
right,
snow, you know.
That's right.
But another good pink one over there.
That's right. That's Springwood Pink. It's been around a long time, but still has its popular place. And Springwood White, its sister plant.
Two superb ground cover plants.
Right.
And actually,
really smother the ground.
Carneas stand a fair amount of shade.
They do, yes, that's right. They're one of the few heathers that will stand some shade, whereas, of course, some, or almost all of them, like nice open position and south-facing slopes, ideally. Keep the colour, the richness of them.
I mean, one of the things I noticed also, I went to a garden from Oswestry, you know, on the Welsh border, and I looked down. They had an acid source so they could have a wide range, but the garden had a huge area of the coloured foliage, both Kalunas and the Carneas, the Cineras, the whole range. They played a lot on coloured foliage.
Yes, that's right.
I don't think enough people do pay attention, do they, to coloured foliage?
No, that's right. It is very important, particularly positioning of the plant is absolutely crucial with the coloured foliage. You've got to get it in the right place, you've got to get plenty of sun on it, and then you'll get the best out of that colour.
I noticed that when we looked at some, just going past, the colour is on the sun, the red tints are on the sunny side of the plant.
That's right. You've got to have that.
It's no good looking at the north side of the plant, or you don't see the colour.
That's right. You just don't get that intensity.
But look at that there. I mean, that's an architectural plant, isn't it? There?
Well, that of course is a tree heather. That's Albert's Gold, which will grow quite large.
When you say quite large, what height are we talking about?
Well, in the southwest of England, I would say about 2 metres plus. And of course, we keep them trimmed, and it's a good idea, I think, in its early years to keep it trimmed because it does split with snow. If you get snow on top of it, it can open the whole plant out. So you need to keep it trimmed. But it's a lovely plant. It's one of the few hardy sort of golden forms of heather, of the tree heaths, and it's I think there's a lot of potential.
It has.
Beautiful white flowers in another month or two.
But look how it varies when you go there and see that really, really dark green
Yes,
sort
that's,
of
yes,
shorter
yes.
one.
It's almost a plum sort of purple colour.
And that one is...
And that one there's Jan, which is another new variety that's come on the market. It's supposed to flower twice a year, which is quite a unique thing. Oh, I think it's Jan after January, because it's supposed it's supposed to flower in January. Although we've trimmed that one back for cuttings, and of course we're not going to get any flower in it this year.
Yeah. And then when you actually look here, I mean, there's the Kaluna there, so spiky, isn't it? The one there.
Yes,
the flowers
that's right.
didn't really open.
That's right. That's Battle of Arnhem. Again, it's a very late flowering when he does flower. Has a sort of purpley tinge in flower, and it's very deep foliage. And again, a great contrast plant. When you're looking for something to go with the golden foliage, you get a really intense contrast there.
So you could actually, I mean, when you say contrast, you've got up there Humpty Dumpty, isn't it? Which is almost like a little conifer.
Yeah, that's the ideal small rockery, small tub plant, little moss green heather with tiny little white flowers, and it's a perfect rockery Kaluna.
I noted you've actually got a good range. We've passed by a number of these Dahliensis hybrids.
The Dahliensis, I think, are potentially a beautiful plant for those people who really want to cover the ground quickly and in a hurry, because they're faster growing than the Carneas. They are absolutely smother the ground. I mean, they're only 2 years old, and they're already smothering the area of the ground that they've been planted in, and they really showing a lovely spread of colour at this time of year.
This white one here, I mean, that's one of the new forms.
A new form, yes, that's Dunregan. Came from Scotland, and it's got also an intense lemon yellow foliage in the spring.
Which makes it an improvement, really, on silver smell, which has been around a long time.
That's exactly right. I think, in fact, it's originated as a sport on silver smells, and it's gradually improving the strains.
Now, what's the other one along there? You see the dome one in flower that's spreading out nicely.
There. Oh, actually, that's Arthur Johnson. But
been around a long time.
It has been around a long time. It should be bigger than that. Of course, it's probably the largest of all the Dahliensis. Yeah. It will grow up to a metre. And it can be very effective planted on in a big block, because it does throw out a vast amount of colour on very long flower spikes. And of course, at this time of year, when so much in the garden is
so it's worth actually remembering, of course, that these aren't their natural shape, because you are always clipping these.
That's right. Unfortunately, we never get a plant really looking in perfect condition, because we're always threatening them, and I think it's an unfortunate place for them to be, really, because they're always getting trimmed about, they're always getting chopped. Especially the more popular varieties, of course. Because
you said these are your mother beds, but this has been, it looks to me, these have been about 3 years.
Yes, they were 3 years originally from planting, but they were planted very late in the season, so they're really about 2 growing seasons they've had on them, really. But,
because you have older beds, but...
That's right. There are 3 beds really running current. This is the latest of them. And this is, I think, the most sort of productive one at the present time. Obviously, the material on it's very fresh. This is a beauty.
That's important, isn't it, to have fresh material, clean material for cutting production?
That's right. I mean, you get good long spikes.
Yeah. So when do you actually take material?
Well, most of the time we do it in June onwards, really. Because we have facilities up above the nursery, we can take cuttings any time of the year. We have hotbeds, heated glass house, and this sort of thing.
That sounds ever so nice, you know. You're talking about heated glass houses and potting sheds, and this is wet, miserable rain. So can we actually go up and see actually how you treat material?
Yes, by all means, so let's go up and have a look at the glass house.
Despite how nice the beds look.
Right. Well, Terry, this is where we actually do the cuttings, and we use this tray here, which holds 273, but we count 250 expected rooting.
A real commercial tray.
That's right, that's right. It's nice and deep, and it's got, as you can see, a whole lot of holes. That's right.
And the board for pushing them out.
That's right.
So actually, the process here, which is being done, is actually one little plant in each cell.
That's right, exactly. And it generally is to ease the job at a later stage, and it means that there's a lot of advantages with using this system, because you've got less root damage, or in fact almost no root damage at all. You know exactly the individual plant that is there and ready for potting on, and certainly speed of potting, you can pot a lot more of these than you would out of a normal tray.
I mean, this method of taking cuttings by dragging off the leaves at the bottom, twisting the end off, is something that you'd never tell an amateur how to take heather cuttings.
No, that's right. I mean, it's basically due to the fact that time is of the essence, and obviously when you're doing it on a production basis like we are, you've got to consider the time factor, and also the fact that we've got the ideal conditions for rooting, and the environment we're working with is absolutely ideal and so that we can get away with doing this kind of thing.
So how long will it
cutting
be
corners.
before these root?
Around about a month, depending on the time of year. Sometimes, I mean, a heather can show signs of rooting after only 10 days, the ideal time, but about a month we would suspect that they should be rooted through and be ready then for weaning off and potting on.
So this is really why you're taking bushy cuttings, you're treating them what I would consider roughly, but obviously it's very skilled hands that are working.
Yes,
because
yes,
your
yes,
clean
yes,
conditions and your ideal conditions for rooting.
Well, that's right, and the rooting medium's important. I mean, that's a peat perlite medium, which is the 50-50 peat perlite, and that's an important basis to start with.
Well, if you're putting in, as you said, something eventually approaching 500,000, your propagating house must look impressive, so can we have a look at that?
Well, Terry, this is the propagating house where the cuttings come to.
What a change, though, this type of house is from the old sort of houses. I mean, a very light and house,
That's right.
isn't it?
Absolutely essential. Absolutely essential for for this time of year, particularly low light, and we need every advantage we can get in way of light and as much sun as possible if we can get it at this time of year. Always difficult.
But now over there, you've got what's almost like a modern version of the old system of propagating, haven't you? With the bench. And it looks like heating cables underneath.
That's right.
But no glass, you're using polythene.
No, that's right. We use this very thin polythene on that, and that does very much the same job as glass used to do. And it's very adequate and obviously raised above the plants, so it's not actually in contact with the actual cuttings themselves.
So are these got warm beds underneath?
Yes, these two here have hot beds. This is a hot water system as opposed to an electric wired system, but works very much the same way. Constant temperature, around 70 degrees centigrade, just keeping the cuttings moving along and rooting within about a month.
Now, that's nice, clear, light-grade polythene on the top of those. Do you have that all the year round?
No, in the summer months, and obviously when the sun is at its hottest, we're going to use a milky polythene.
So
And we
you're
use
actually
shading over the top as well. And we have a joint shading process then.
Now, if these are rooting cuttings, these you've left open, is this to water them?
That's right, we're going to be watering these, and then there'll be a fungicide also.
And then they're covered up?
Then they're covered over again, they'll be covered over sometime today.
These look far more established, so I take it that these are the weaned ones.
That's right, these have already rooted and well established enough to be moved off the hotbeds, and now these beds themselves, of course, don't have any heat underneath them at all.
They're nice bushy plants.
They are, and they're ready now for potting on.
Have a look at one. Whee, how'd it come? Goodness me, look at that, for fine roots. Gorgeous plant that is. I wish people would realise just how finely rooted heather. That's why you must always pot them lightly.
That's right. They have a very fine root system, and one needs to be treat them with a lot of delicacy on the root system.
So they'd be trimmed or
yes,
to make them bushy?
this top here, particularly this one with the flower there, would be chopped right back, and then he'd be ready for potting.
Yeah. So, I mean, sort of, how many are potted sort of an hour in these?
Well, Sophie would get through about 800 to 1,000 an hour. She'd be potting into a special meat mix that we use. We use a very light, open, airy mix, which consists of 2 different types of peat and slow-release fertiliser and rock wool substance, which we use.
So a nice sort of perpetual motion and sort of getting that right firming.
That's
but then
absolutely
what
right.
happens to them after that?
After that, they get put on a trailer, obviously, and then they get taken down to the nursery. And I think you're best off if you go down there and see my colleague and partner, Ray.
Right. Oh, Terry, it's very nice of you to help me get this order out.
Well, it's a thought. I'll think about it. But it's very easy to handle plants like that.
It's a great boon, actually, these M-pot carriers, they're called. We get 30 in a tray like that. It's a nice way to handle.
But these are little 7-centimetre pots.
Yeah, that's right. We do mainly 7s, although now more and more we're doing them in a bigger 9-centimetre pot. They hold 20 in a tray.
Now, what would an order like this, where that's off to?
Well, some go to landscape people, of course. A lot go to garden centres. Some go to other nurseries. They like to grow them on.
I mean, there's a lovely range here for this time of the year, isn't there, with our various carnias at the back. That one's, I think, December red, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. It doesn't flower in December, and it's not particularly red, is it? Some of these aren't named very well, but it's a good variety all the same. One of the older ones.
There's an old variety, one of the Kalunas.
That's right. Ruth Sparks. It's still one of the good yellow foliage kalunas.
Nice low one.
Yes, that's right. Nice and compact. Does have the tendency to revert, although I think we've got quite a good strain of it. It doesn't seem to revert so
This is
much.
the importance, isn't it, of your mother beds, of actually having very good quality material that you're propagating
Yes,
from.
that is true. That's the value of that stock bed. We can keep a real eye on it and rogue it through and get rid of any bad types.
Now, what was the one you were actually carrying through? 'Cause it's a nice bushy coloured kaluna.
Yes, Robert Chapman, again, one of the older foliage kalunas, but still one of the best, I think. We think there are different strains of it in the trade. Some are better than others. Hopefully we've got one of the good ones.
Yeah, because it makes a reasonably tall plant, doesn't it? I mean, that's a nice bushy young plant.
That's right. And, you know, the colder it gets, the redder it seems to go, the better the colour in it, really.
And one good Dahliensis there, isn't it? Look at that.
Yeah, that's just about at its best now. That's white perfection. I think it's better than the old silver schmelz, you know, which has been around
another
for-
one. It's a good bushy one, isn't it? And holds its flower a long time.
Yeah, it's a good one. We like that. We're propagating a lot of that.
Yeah. And I noticed one, I know it's right back here, but no flowers at all there.
No. No, well, that's a typical example of one with two bites of the cherry, you know, so it's a summer flowering, tetralix, so you've got your flowers in the summer, but you've got that nice foliage right through the winter, so it's a good one. It's got two characteristics that we like.
And I mean, there you've got Ruth Sparks in the yellow. Now, what's the fellow there?
Well, that's Gold Haze. It's a bit more upright, isn't it, than Ruth Sparks over there?
Yeah.
But a nice golden one.
And you've got a good one by your feet there. That has to be pink spangles.
Yeah, you're right, Terry. That is pink spangles. One of the nicest of the carnias.
Very sort of vigorous one, isn't it?
Yeah, covers the ground well.
Yeah. And I like the colours. You've got an interesting colour combination here. That one's obviously was Mediterranean, Erigena.
That's right. It's the only Erigena in this block. It's a beauty. I love the colour of that.
Irish salmon.
Irish salmon. Similar to another one called Irish dusk.
Yeah.
But
And
it's
next-
a lovely colour.
And next to one of the foliage kalunas.
Yeah, Silver Night. I like the dead flowers on it. Not everybody does. Some people like to clip them off, but I think through the winter that adds to it, really.
That seems a good point to mention, because at the back there, just next to it, you've got the dead flowers there on one of the vegans.
Yes, again, I mean, it's a matter of taste. Some people like the dead flowers on them. I think it adds a bit of colour through the winter. Again, of course, the summer flowering heather.
Yeah. But when you actually say colour, I mean, in one of the other houses, you've got a marvellous sort of range, haven't you, plants waiting to go out of gorgeous coloured foliage.
Looking at their best, Terry.
Nice, healthy material.
Yes, yeah.
But mentioning healthy material, I mean, this you say is this classic type of thing going out to a landscape person. So what I'm actually going to do is to go and find someone who's got a little garden that's actually planting heather. See these type of things planted out. This is a little farmhouse garden on the edge of Dartmoor, where heathers have really been used to give colour actually all the year round, but on a winter's day, look how effective it looks. There's some young Dahliensis. Those are going to get up 18 inches high, contrasting well with the heathers and little conifers. Contrast of colour. Ericacarnia springwood pink. Lovely sort of change there with the delicate grey of a tetralix. And look when the sun catches pink spangles. Isn't it magnificent? And then the Dahliensis hybrids are going to go up, giving you that height. You've actually got to be careful, because things like this Erica macchiana is a fast grower. And with a little miniature Cluna vulgaris like that, you see it's running into it. Got to watch that. But, you know, over the other side's an area where, well, it gets shade in the early morning. And so right in the shadiest corner has been put carnias. They sweep round. How's that for one plant of December red? A long flowering hybrid, but magnificent number of flowers. In the corner where they want height, there's an Erica arborea Estrella Gold. Lovely combination there of flowers and buds and foliage. Nice spiky effect. And that sweeps along with the general mixture. And they're a very, very popular carnia there. Just a group all running into each other of Myrotum ruby. But, you know, they had a very awkward bank and they planted up with heathers. Only a matter of a few years ago, there was a large tree here that had to be felled. The walls rebuilt, and then the area was really dug over, lots of organic matter put in to improve the fertility, and then to make ease of maintenance, just planted up with heathers. You can see now how they're beginning to combine beautifully with different conifers. The light up the top there is catching the growths there of actually one of the dwarf forms of our Scots pine. That's the variety almost certainly bovarensis. A nice combination of the evergreen foliage. Of course, some people don't like actually conifers with heathers, but I think they're working well here. The planting. Well, I say the ground was prepared well, and they've used the planting system of allowing a fair amount of space for each plant to run into each other. The real vigorous plants were given a larger planting distance. Of course, some people would actually put little plants in and get them to cover the ground quickly. But here, they've used a good layer of organic matter to control the weeds. A nice system there, and then using some of the trailing conifers to come out over the front to give contrast to foliage. But round the corner they've got a little peat garden, and there's little pockets have been made again for heather plants. They grow lots of gentians, and they're all beautifully labelled in the front, but those are going to flower, of course, later on in the year. And as one goes round the house, they had another bed. I suppose most of us would probably go and plant the thing up with bedding plants, but no. With their love of heathers and thinking that they'd like colour that they can look upon there in the winter, it's been planted up with a whole range, nice little hummocky plants, sending out their flowers. It doesn't matter what the weather throws at them, they'll flower. You can have a covering of snow, and as soon as the snow melts in the winter, through can come the little flowers. Marvellous plants. We've seen how so easy they are to grow from cuttings. We can see how easy they are to grow and produce you a lot of colour. So when I think about it, I suppose I ought to have a heather, shouldn't I, as a plant of the week. And there, in the front of me there, is one called Erica Carnea King George. Probably of the Carneas, one of the most famous, but it's an old one. There was a whole group, raised by Backhouse of York in 1910. Lots of them had regal names, but this one, King George, the king, the prime one of them all. And look at all the flowers, and the characteristic very much of Carneas of having the flowers coming on this one-sided raceme, as we call it. But look at the mixture of colours you get. When the flowers are fully open, there's a strong colour. Those that haven't opened yet are that much paler. There can't, be many plants that can give you that much colour this time of the year on one plant. Well, that was given an award of merit. You can see why. So let's end the programme on heathers, growing them commercially and using them in the garden with this marvellous plant here, Erica Carnea King George. What a beauty it is.
If you'd like any more information about the programme, please send a stamped addressed envelope to Gardens for All, TSW, Derrys Cross, Plymouth, PL1 2SP.